Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a topic that, well, it can feel incredibly challenging for families navigating difficult childhood behaviors.
Hmm.
Think about it: defiance, aggression, those really intense tantrums, even more extreme actions sometimes.
Yeah.
It's a reality that leaves so many parents feeling stressed and confused and just searching for answers.
It's such a deeply emotional space for families, isn't it? Often filled with frustration and worry about how best to support their child and the whole family unit, really.
Absolutely. And the material we have for this deep dive, it really tackles this head on. It explores the root causes, touches on some conventional approaches, and then delves quite significantly into a less conventional path using homeopathy.
So our mission here is to go through this text together, pull out the core insights, really understand the spectrum of challenging behaviors that are discussed,
Right.
explore the homeopathic perspective presented in the material, and maybe connect it to some broader discussions the source brings up about like childhood development and societal factors.
Exactly. We're going to pull out the specific details, those kind of surprising facts, and frame them as maybe aha moments from the source, just to help you get well informed on this pretty complex subject quickly.
Yeah.
The material, it includes case studies, discussions around diagnoses like ADHD and conduct disorder, comparisons to conventional treatments, and some reflections on societal issues that are definitely, well, thought-provoking.
So let's start by looking at how the source actually describes this spectrum of challenging behaviors and, the conventional views it presents alongside that.
Okay, so the text lays out a really wide range. It starts with what might seem like typical infant fussiness, but it's described in the source as pretty intense defiance.
Right. Like an infant who cries constantly unless held, demanding attention 24/7.
Yeah, or gets visibly angry when she can't get her hands in her mouth, that kind of thing.
It then sort of escalates to describe more overt aggression, hitting, throwing things, biting, spitting, even threatening violence, destroying property.
And it covers attention issues, too. Children easily bored, unable to concentrate, maybe rushing work, talking out of turn, all leading to difficulties, maybe in the classroom.
You also see descriptions of rule breaking, self sabotage, and in the more severe cases presented, a stated lack of remorse.
The material uses specific examples to really underscore the intensity some families are facing.
Hmm.
There's Trisha, this infant described as screaming day and night, unless held in a very particular way.
Or Janie, who the source reports swore over 100 times a day, though, interestingly, sometimes immediately apologizing afterwards.
And David, with his striking hour-long silent determination or yelling, "I hate you," during tantrums, it sounds really difficult.
Yeah, and the source includes even more intense examples, like Corky reportedly throwing a knife or kicking his mom over candy,
Wow.
or Christopher, who the source says pushed his brother down the stairs or threatened his mother with a gun, and Jason described kicking his teacher or hitting his mom.
These aren't presented as like common everyday things, obviously, but they highlight the extreme end of the spectrum this material is trying to address.
Exactly. And the source connects these behaviors to conventional diagnoses. It mentions ADHD, describing it as an epidemic in the US based on its own sources.
Right, noting a significant rise in Ritalin and Prozac use, according to a citation within the text itself.
It also covers conduct disorder, or CD, stating it's seen as predictive of adult antisocial behavior and often associated with ADHD and ODD.
Okay.
The source provides prevalence rates and describes how CD symptoms might progress across age groups, from overt aggression in young kids to more complex issues like stealing, lying, vandalism, substance abuse in adolescents.
So when discussing conventional treatment, the material mentions the prescription medications often used, like Ritalin, Adderall, alongside therapy and behavioral interventions.
Yeah, but
But
the source also highlights what it views as pretty significant limitations.
like what?
Well, the text states that medications alone are often insufficient for CD, that it requires these really comprehensive approaches, psychosocial, behavioral, educational interventions.
Right, more than just a pill.
Exactly. And it also notes high dropout rates from conventional treatments cited as 40–60% in the source, even higher for aggressive youth. And it presents the view that studies show CD is difficult to treat conventionally and has a poor long-term prognosis, according to the source's interpretation anyway.
Hmm. So given that perspective on conventional approaches, the material then transitions pretty heavily into exploring homeopathy.
Right, that's really the core of this text, using homeopathy for these challenging behaviors. The basic idea, as the source describes it, is matching the individual's unique symptom Picture physical, emotional, mental to a specific medicine.
And this medicine is derived from substances that, in larger doses, would produce similar symptoms in a healthy person. That's the foundational concept the source calls like cures like.
Exactly. And the source explains these preparations are highly diluted. It uses the example of even a low potency like 6C having only 1 part per 100 million of the original substance.
So they argue that extreme dilution is why remedies from toxic sources are considered never toxic, according to the source.
That's their claim. And the method for choosing a remedy, again, according to the source, is based on identifying the most characteristic, sometimes really unusual symptoms. The source even introduces this concept of classifying remedies by kingdom, like animal, plant, or mineral.
Oh, interesting. Suggesting general tendencies might point towards one kingdom.
Kind of, yeah. And the case studies are where the source really tries to demonstrate this approach. It presents specific children with complex issues and details how homeopathy was applied and the reported outcomes.
So the insight isn't just the symptoms, but how the source sees these diverse symptoms forming a unique pattern that points to a specific remedy.
Precisely. Let's look at Janie again, the girl mentioned with the frequent swearing. The source describes her symptoms as this mix of defiance, pushing buttons, but also those immediate apologies after swearing. Plus, intense fears, tornadoes, rain, loud noises, needing earplugs. Fear of animals, maybe linked to a dog bite history. Twisting hair, chewing clothing, and these really striking behaviors like spitting, licking feet or arms, and even barking when her mother was upset.
Wow, that's quite a picture.
It is, and the source highlights this combination. The fears, the animal-like behaviors, the rage followed by remorse as forming a specific pattern. It states this led to the remedy, Listen, made from rabid dog saliva.
Listen, rabid dog saliva.
Yeah, the material notes this aligns with the hair of the dog concept, and that Listen is known for fear of water, dogs, and animal-like traits in the homeopathic literature cited by the source.
Okay, and the reported outcome for Janie.
The source says her barking, spitting, and swearing diminished dramatically. From over 100 times a day to just a couple. She could sit still more easily, bathing became less of a struggle, teachers were reportedly amazed. Her licking and obsessive tendencies lessened, and she was reported as 75% better overall. Headaches resolved, apology letters replaced by love notes. So this case, as presented, really emphasizes how they see disparate symptoms linking together.
Okay, what about David, the boy dealing with divorce, sadness, and defiance?
Right. The source describes his striking silent determination, difficult transitions, saying, I hate you, during tantrums, concentration issues, but also, interestingly, superb phone skills, articulate speech, a love for imaginative stories, and this pattern of alternating closeness and rejection with his mom.
That sounds complex.
It does. And the source also details his physical symptoms, recurrent styes, blocked tear ducts, swollen eyelids, stomach aches, sinusitis, and even offensive body odor.
Physical symptoms too.
Yeah, and specific cravings mentioned, crunchy, salty foods, and ice-cold drinks.
Okay.
So the source presents the insight that this unique mix, emotional states, behaviors, physical symptoms, even cravings, formed a pattern pointing to the remedy Veratrum album.
And the outcome reported for him.
According to the source, far fewer outbursts, improved boundary issues, diminished fears, significantly better temper tantrums. The source notes his styes and body odor cleared up. He reportedly needed repeated doses, especially after a relapse the source attributes to trying a prescription medicine, but overall reported as 80–85% improved with better grades and friendships.
Okay, and Christopher, with the violence, fascination, and internal conflict.
Yeah, that one sounds particularly tough. The source paints a picture of lifelong struggle, low self-esteem, difficulty adapting, rudeness, being uncomfortable in his own skin, but crucially this deep fascination with violence and weapons.
Right.
He lied and stole, but apparently made it obvious. The source describes him as a bundle of contradictions, sweet and empathetic one moment, then cruel, insulting, physically aggressive towards family, even threatening his mother.
That's disturbing.
It is. And what's striking in the source's description is his stated awareness of an internal conflict, a dark side, a voice telling him to do bad things, plus a history of severe criticism, ridicule, physical harm mentioned in the text.
So the source highlights this combination. Low self-esteem from abuse or criticism, the inner conflict, maliciousness, Apparent lack of remorse.
Exactly, as key pointers. And the source connects this pattern to the remedy anacardium orientale.
And the outcome.
The stated outcome was significant progress reported. His mother trusted him more, he took responsibility for siblings, his confidence and self-esteem reportedly blossomed, he persevered despite nervousness, smiled more, reported as 65% better, and continuing treatment.
So these cases are really specific.
Very. And the source briefly mentions a few others just to show the range, like Corky with rage and biting needing stramonium, or Jeffrey with blood gore obsession needing china officinalis.
Oh.
The source is really using these cases to illustrate its core argument about individualization and pattern recognition in homeopathy.
Okay.
And the text explains that healing with homeopathy, according to their view, can sometimes involve a temporary worsening of symptoms or behavior, they call it an aggravation, before improvement sets in.
So it might get a bit worse before it gets better.
That's what the source suggests is possible, and it notes repeated doses might be needed if symptoms return. The source states progress develops and stabilizes over 1-2 years, which it recommends for maximizing gains.
Right. So moving beyond the individual cases then, the material also steps back to look at the broader societal context and contributing factors.
Yes, it does. The source impartially discusses the complex multifactorial origins of conduct disorder, stating it involves biological, psychological, and social factors. It's not just one thing.
And it particularly emphasizes adverse family and environmental influences.
Strongly. Things mentioned include parental psychopathology, chaotic households, divorce, parental absence, other significant losses. And the source makes a very strong link between family violence, physical abuse and neglect, and the development of severe behavioral problems and conduct disorders. It states that the histories of these children reveal, again and again, a pattern of abuse or neglect, often unrecognized or unreported.
That's a heavy point.
It is. The source also discusses the impact of neglect, like kids being shuffled through foster care, noting it can lead to isolation, antisocial behavior, difficulty forming relationships. Conveying this deep message, the source suggests it sends, "You are not lovable."
Wow.
The text states that abuse isn't limited by social class and that abusers themselves are often troubled, perhaps repeating patterns they experienced. It also mentions societal factors like social stress and lack of resources linked to poverty as contributors.
The source also delves into sexual abuse, doesn't it?
It does, noting a painful awareness today compared to the past. And it includes a difficult concept presented in the text, that children can be both victims and perpetrators.
How so?
It cites an example from the Jerry Springer Show presented without endorsement, just as an example from the source, about 2 teenage brothers charged with raping their younger half-sister after seeing a program about incest. The source reports the police officer cited stated the brothers showed absolutely no remorse.
Right, okay. So it's important to understand that's an example cited within the source material we're discussing.
Exactly. And the source also references the connection between early chronic stress, neglect, abuse, lack of nurturing, and impacts on early infant brain development and later aggression. It cites other sources linking violence to a lack of touch and healthy attachment in infancy.
The text suggests that early identification of problems, say in schools, is important, but can be hindered by system disincentives, like the cost of special education.
That's mentioned, yeah. And it summarizes proposed solutions put forth by experts cited within the source, things like treating violence as a public health issue, focusing on prevention, teaching conflict resolution, restricting media violence, investing in at-risk communities, coordinating services. Again, these are suggestions presented in the source material, not necessarily endorsed by us.
Understood. And finally, in this section, the source notes alternative medicine becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, it quotes Dr. Wayne Jonas stating it's becoming an important main part of American medicine and mentions a growing trend for homeopathy specifically.
Okay. Which brings us back to the practical question this material really seeks to answer. Can homeopathy actually help children with these challenging behaviors?
Right. And the source answer is, well, nuanced. It says, theoretically, homeopathy should be able to help anyone, but realistically, unfortunately, homeopathy does not help every child.
Okay, so what makes the difference, according to the source?
It lists factors it deems important for success. On the homeopath side, there's skill, knowledge, taking the case carefully, selecting the right remedy, managing the case over time.
And on the family side?
Careful observation, detailed reporting of symptoms and changes, a commitment for 1-2 years is recommended, plus faith, patience, avoiding things that might interfere, and consistent follow-up appointments.
It sounds like quite a commitment.
It does. The text offers guidance on how to evaluate a homeopath according to its perspective. Ask if they practice classical homeopathy one medicine at a time, a long initial interview. Inquire about their training extensive, 500 plus hours or 2 plus years, preferred by the source. Experience, and the percentage of their practice focused on homeopathy, minimum 50% suggested.
And it warns against certain methods.
Yeah, the source specifically advises avoiding practitioners who use machines, pendulums, or muscle testing for remedy selection.
Good to know what the source advises. It tackles practical questions too, right? Like how long treatment takes.
Yes. 1 to 2 years is recommended for maximal gains, though it says significant progress often happens in the first 1-3 months.
And visits. How often?
Initially, maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, then becoming less frequent just a few times a year, or as needed as the child improves and stabilizes.
What about dosing? How often do they take the remedy?
It's described as only when necessary, which could mean single doses repeated when symptoms return, or sometimes daily or weekly on a schedule. The source emphasizes staying in touch with the practitioner about this.
And side effects?
Described as individual. The source states homeopathic medicines are safe and gentle, but powerful, and it reiterates that temporary worsening or aggravation can occur as part of the healing process described.
What about cost?
That's
That's always a factor.
discussed. The initial visit is higher, maybe $300, $400 cited in the source, because it takes time. Follow-ups are less, $100, $200 perhaps, and become less frequent. The medicine itself is stated as negligible in cost.
Okay.
The test explicitly states a year's worth of homeopathic medicine is usually less than one conventional prescription according to their comparison.
And the safety of using toxic sources. Like the lesson example.
Directly addressed. The source repeats its assertion. They are never toxic due to the extreme dilution process.
What about diet? Does that matter?
The text says homeopathy works even for kids who eat a lot of junk food, but obviously a healthy diet is better overall for anyone.
Makes sense. And what if there isn't a homeopath nearby?
The source mentions remote consultations, video, or phone as an option, stating results are generally just as good, though you might need a local doctor for physical exams. Or, given infrequent visits later on, traveling to a neighboring area is also noted as feasible.
Okay. So wrapping up this section, what's the source's overall estimate of success?
According to the source, its estimate is that 70% of children with behavioral problems can be helped with homeopathy if treatment is continued for at least 1 year.
70% is quite specific.
It is, and the text emphasizes that it takes teamwork and persistence. It urges families to evaluate the cost in terms of money, time, and effort, and concludes that only you can answer if it's worth pursuing, But
But
the source concludes that the reported changes in the cases presented are real and possible for your child, too. That's the hopeful note it ends on there.
okay, so we've taken this deep dive into material that, well, it lays bare the intense challenges of certain childhood behaviors. We looked at the conventional views and their stated limitations as presented in the text, then focused heavily on the homeopathic approach through those specific, sometimes very striking case studies and their reported outcomes.
And we also touched on the larger societal context the source brings in contributing factors like abuse and neglect.
It's clear from this material these are deeply complex issues with really profound implications. And the source presents homeopathy as one potential path, one that places immense value on understanding the individual's unique symptom picture and history.
Yeah, that individualization seems key to the source's perspective.
So, reflecting on the source's strong link between early childhood experiences, nurturing, and later behavior, and its concluding message of hope. What does this source challenge us, maybe you listening, to think about regarding challenging behaviors? Is it primarily about addressing symptoms on the surface? Or is it about addressing deeper wounds and patterns? And how do different approaches measure up in the source's view of that goal?
It's a big question, and the source leaves us with this powerful idea, doesn't it? That even in what it calls the darkest of hearts, healing and peace are presented as possible.